This is Hunting Fields, Chapter 5. Light at the end of the tunnel. It is said God will never allow you to get into a place of tribulation where he doesn't give you the means to overcome with mercy, with merely the resources at hand. We only have to lift up our heads and look to him as the gifts of victory, healing, and wisdom manifest before us. How did I get here? The answer was not a mystery at all. She knew exactly how and why she was here, and how she only had herself to blame. Through the rush into her head, almost taking over the image of blackness she sees before her. What a fool. She was to think she could go to Berlin and tell De Fuhrer what was going on in the countryside of her small Heidelberg hamlet, and add to the idea he might put a stop to it because she told him to. Her father so often told her, we must never reveal mother's Jewish descent. Keep our heads down. There's enough to worry about, to make enough worry to be made by ourselves without adding to the stories of the few missing Jewish children. There are so many more than just a few, Esther screams at her father as she pulls out the clothes and starts to pack them in the small leather case. I know what I saw. They're hunting them right up on the Baron's land, right under our noses. That's ridiculous. All your talk of seeing witchcraft and women changing into animals, her father says with a sarcastic laugh as he turns to his own wife, looking at her for some kind of support. She just stares down, shaking her head. There's no such thing as witches, he says as he throws up his hands and walks out of the room. Yet he also knew he couldn't stop her. She was already a grown woman. Esther never listened to anyone, let alone her own father, a man who only seems to care about making money anyway. And what little family honor he might have had was long gone once everyone discovered he lived a whole second life, complete with another family and 2 children. Even her own mother's pleas for help to stay out of it fell on deaf ears when she finally and proudly marched out of the house to go tell Hitler what was what. Her sweet mother was always kind, looking for the good in every situation. She was just as bad, willing to take him back into our home. Everything is forgiven, as if another wife and children never existed. I thought you said you were a tractor. Suddenly, she hears the angry command of the screeching little man's voice cutting across the surface of the mists, like screams mysteriously carrying across a still lake. Their voices seem like they might be right outside the little refuge of the fallen log, yet she knows they have already ridden quite some distance as she heard the thundering hoofsteps fade down the dark forest path. Mother Rachel, I do love my mother. She is the glue that holds the family together, even when father tore it apart with his confession. Maybe it was that act that drove me to such a destructive, self-righteous end. She never understood how a woman can live with a man who would cheat and then have the audacity to want to bring adulterous children into their home. Yet the depression that has settled upon the world has had a toll on everyone except the rich, that is. Everyone says I'm just like my mother, with tall dark hair and beautiful fair features. Her mother could easily been an actress. Her mother plays such beautiful piano many times. In Esther's own quiet times, she could almost hear the echoing of the sounds, especially in the soft rhythms of the rain or soft breezes blowing through the trees. Even now in this horror, I can hear those sounds, those songs. It was the piano playing that got Esther herself invited up to the Baron's home with his daughter Brunhilde. And while she did like the idea of brushing shoulders with the rich, she quickly saw the darker side of nobility that so many others have alluded to, but the most will not even dare speak. What did it matter any longer? She almost laughs to herself. The young woman's mind snaps back to the present with the not so distant sound of another high-pitched horn coming now from behind her, and the immediate scroll of laughter that echoed her own gasp of fear back from the dark mists where the riders came. She glances again down the tunnel of this dark, cold, dark, wet wood tree trunk to the now dimly lit opening on the far end. The increasing thought of her being trapped forever in this wood tomb is becoming more realistically possible. Off in the distance, she suddenly hears dogs. Stay here and the dogs will definitely find her. The thought of being coached into a tomb or a coffin leaves little option as to whether or not she should try to wait it out through the night. She has one hope: get as far away from the horror as possible and as fast as possible. Her mind is racing as she tries to decipher what the man said. Could that direction possibly lead out of this hell to safety? Or does it just lead further down the path right into the road they are heading towards? Even if she does happen to lead out, the question is out of where. She has no idea where she is or even what direction she is going. The sky high above the trees is now deep red and gray, and soon will turn dark, removing any light from below the dark trees. Even the fog that seems to conduct the light with its own eerie glow is dimming into the darker gray with every breath. It was then the realization of the only real question she could possibly ponder as she actually speaks out softly yet audible to herself. How in heaven do I get out of here? God help me. She's immediately prompted to turn her head towards the light at the end of the dark tunnel. An almost mystical brightness in the middle of the pitch black tunnel appears, and she knows. She crawls to the opening, feeling the damp ooze between her fingers and under her knees. She has to hold back her own revulsion. The smell alone is enough to make her gag. More than once, she had to swallow back vomit, not daring even to make even the sound of her regurgitations. She has always had a weak stomach for anything rotten. Even trying to help her mother change her little brother's diapers, Dieter's diapers made her throw up the minute she would see it. Yeah, a big, brave woman going to go tell the most powerful man in the world what and how. And he's going to suddenly listen to you when you can't even change a diaper, she says silently to herself. There were at least one or two creatures she felt slither or crunch under her crawling hands as the wetness and slime is suddenly felt. At one point, she had to nearly slither herself through the narrowing of the log, holding back the panic of the claustrophobia, entangling its own arms around her in fear. She hurries through the fallen log across more slithering bodies, but these creatures too didn't seem to move, as interested in making their presence little known as she was. Esther pushes her head into so much more light than in the dark tunnel as she just gets ready to step out of her recess's hiding place at the other end of the large thicket. Even in the dark, her eyes could pick up the slightest light of what appears to be a long hidden glade stretching back down a soft grassy field, fading into what appears to be another road, turning into the distance away from the now far off cries and screams. Suddenly, at the far end of the meadow, a burst of movement erupts from the mists. What appears to be a small, thin boy emerging from under the thick darkness, his scrawling body hardly larger than a 5-year-old brother, but obviously older, running frantically for his life. Esther, at first startled by the movement, pulls back into the hidden recesses. The screaming child must have spotted her as he starts running right towards her. She quickly crawls back into the tree trunk, crouching in the black shadows. Just as a horse and rider leap over the brush, following the screaming child, the rider screamed itself, but sounded more like nails across a chalkboard, the voice being clearly a deep yet female one, screeching with the sounds like a witch's cackle in hideous ecstasy. "Run, you little bitch, run," the witch taunts from the back of the charging animal. Wide-eyed, Esther stares around the edge of the fallen tree as the taller, thin jester chases the screaming, naked young boy. The stumbling child screams, and without looking where he's running, zigzags over his own feet right towards Esther's hiding place. The witch now circled, taunting him with her horse, almost trampling the boy, methodically knocking the boy to the ground, directing the horse masterfully to step, crushing the screaming boy's feet with the circling animal's hooves. The boy is in desperation, rolls and crawls in heightened adrenalized fear towards the thicket, as the witch, with a smirk of recollection, swings what appears to be a sword and slashes the boy across the back, shoulder, and neck, tumbling him only meters from where Esther lies hiding in the dark. The boy squirms in agonizing spasm of blood spatter and mud, unable to crawl. With any success, the rider reins in the horse, with one arm swinging the sword above its head and neck, almost a comical victory. She quickly dismounts the horse and in a snake-like manner moves towards the boy, pointing the sword at him, releasing the now pulling, frightened horse, whose fear is clearly evident in the animal's wide, tearing eyes. The woman stumbles, trying to walk through the mud in her high stiletto bright red heels, looking almost as ridiculous as the red and green court jester's outfit, now open wide in the front. The young boy slithers to try to escape, pushing with one functioning leg, yet gasping as blood already begins to gurgle out of his mouth from the wound across his neck and back, sliced open from the sword reflecting bright red. As the precious blood tries desperately to close the child's now gaping wound, it spurts that matches his racing heartbeat. The witch's body is lean and muscular, mimicking that of a young man's, with the exception of the breasts hanging out of the open shirt. Yet neither matches the elderly age of the woman's face or the gray, almost white hair, the cackled sound of his voice, and the wisps of gray hair framing the witch's hawk-like, rat-like face gives away its age is much older than the body looks. Letting loose of the horse, but not taking her eyes off her prey, she stabs the sword into the ground right in front of the fallen log where Esther hides, and with the speed of a cat lunges towards the now panicking boy as he struggles to move or possibly crawl away. As the creature moves towards him, she claws at her own court jester's green and red outfit to open the tangled garments that drape in front of her. In her own frustration, she pulls out one of her arms, displaying massively strong back and shoulders that clearly look like an athletic man, her whole body covered in satanic symbol tattoos, now naked to her waist, except for the large red stone necklace hanging between its breasts, itself now getting tangled in her flaying, freed hand. The stone begins to glow brighter as the witch claws at the boy, whose fear seems to have empowered his backward crawling as she falls upon him. This only causes the boy to move with heightened strength and ability. Esther is wide-eyed with fear, seeing the size and strength and furiousness of this monster, her every fiber telling her to crawl back through the tunnel. Run, take her chances on the other side. She pulls even further into the darkness, but can't take her eyes away from the horror. The witch tries to turn the frightened, struggling boy onto his stomach with one arm while struggling to tear at her own clothing, as it only tangles her more. Now adding mud to the wet ground to the mixture, the boy managed to forcefully kick it into the groin of the now screaming banshee. She starts brutally beating the child with her massively strong animal arm. The young boy can hardly whimper in pain, his last breaths of strength fleeing from him almost as fast as the blood gushes from his wounds. The witch cackles and lifts her head in laughter, just as a sword blade suddenly appears out of the mouth, protruding forward from her view. Like some menacing lightning bolt, the witch's eyes wide with horror and wonder. Esther firmly presses the blade through the back of the witch's neck, right through her mouth, and thrusts it forward for the witch to see, almost with its black blood-stained blade dripping right before her eyes. She spasms erect in pain, the jewel hanging around her neck for only a brief moment lights up to bright red and fills the entire glade with a blood-red light, only to quickly fade to black as the witch too suddenly ages to a near mummy-like skeleton and falls to her side like a brittle falling dead tree, the sword sticking strangely through her skull as she lays there. Esther rushes to the boy, who's now still, yet peacefully dead. She doesn't have time to even cry as she quickly stands up and turns her head back towards the direction where the boy came, pausing as now additional distant screams seem to be coming from. Just then the horse nudges her from behind, clearly offering her a ride if she wishes. She caresses the horse as she brings the reins around. She has never ridden a horse before and has no idea how to even start. As the majestic animal bends one of its knees and crouches down next to allowing her to climb up, the horse then rises as she holds on tight to the reins and softly says, "Thank you," to the steed, but also to God. The horse, almost on command, makes an abrupt turnaround and starts charging full speed down the path through a small gap in the brush that Esther only moments before didn't even notice was there. At first, the young woman had to hold onto the neck of the charging animal, if only to balance herself, but also not to fall off. Yet quickly she starts getting into the rhythm of her gallop. Within moments, she matches the horse rhythm, quickly adjusting her legs on the saddle, as she now seems to almost fly through the air, holding only the reins as her feet miraculously find the stirrups. Esther had thought to almost rein in the horse so it wouldn't run so fast. She didn't want to make more noise than it already was. She can still hear the screams of the hunted children, and some who sound like adults, a few much older, some even men, all pleading for their lives. But she could also hear the responses as the sounds seemed to echo through the mist. Gruesome, hideous, almost animalistic, wolf-like, yet like no other animal she's ever heard. Sounds of hatred, tormenting laughter, teasing, merciless, completely evil, ravishing noises like a pack of jackals or wild dogs, first tormenting the prey before falling on it and feasting. "I hope you know where you're going," she silently asked her horse, who seems to be running faster, adjusting with every sound, turning in the opposite direction the sounds come from. There's almost a wind blowing through her long, wet, dark hair. It gives as much comfort as it does caressing her naked body. Through its cold, she seems to feel the increasing freedom it elicits as warm air touches her, as well as comforting whispers, as perhaps the edge of the forest might loom off in the distance, yet within reach. From the back of her horse, its rhythmic hoofbeats and the accompanying bellowing breath, she can feel as well the horse's thundering heartbeat. Feeling the animal is straining to its limit, yet the horse continues to push even a fraction more to add even more pace to the already full-out sprint. Maybe it is her own pounding heart she hears, booming, pleading to be freed of this delicate, restricted rib cage. She just can't seem to get enough oxygen in her burning lungs, something her heart, like a caged screaming canary, would say. The rhythmic beat reminds her of the steady beat of the train she now remembers as centuries ago, in only moments before when she traveled to Berlin. Angels can appear in the most unusual places, often taking the form of animals. They do this not to solve our problems for us, but to add their strength to ours, and perhaps even the odds, and choose And as we choose to make a stand and fight in the battles of the spirit against the forms of darkness. That was chapter 5. Tomorrow will be chapter 6. I am the hooded vigilante. Good night.